Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. It is April 19th. I'm here with Stuart Gibson. We are going to focus on NBA, but also do a touch of MLB as well. Stuart, what's going on?
Yeah, not much. Had a good weekend. Played a little bit of SuperDraft contest this weekend. Trying to kind of transition a little more towards baseball now that the NBA season is winding down. We are, I think, very clearly in kind of this period where there's just going to be guys out every night. They're going to be ruled out with really with little warning, and I think a time to be paying attention to news. And even we're here at noon, and there's like a half dozen high quality players that are questionable, and we don't have really any indication as to whether they'll play or not. So I think a good time to think about lineup construction at this point in the day, and kind of some if then logic where if player X gets ruled out, then do this, or vice versa. Because as the experienced basketball player knows, or DFS basketball player knows, the time is of the essence, and there's a lot of information that needs to be digested in a very short period of time on some of these news slates. So trying to think about kind of ahead of time what to do under certain conditions, I think will kind of save you time towards lock. There are a lot of questionable guys tonight, so maybe we can kind of talk through some of the if-then stuff. Our projections are set up to assume that guys that are, questionable or probable will play, but we could try to take some time to kind of caveat some of these assumed in players and maybe talk about what we would want to do and how we would expect projections to respond if injury news breaks a certain way.
Yeah, fortunately, some of the injury situations we've seen these play out before. We've seen lineups with all Philly possibilities, all Golden State possibilities, Boston, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and start with, based on our current assumptions, who we like as of now. There's a decent chance that it doesn't change much between now and lock. So let's start with guard and say, who do we like as of now? I'll just read off our optimizer at the moment. You can say who you think is relatively sensitive and who's not. We have right now in the guard position Clarkson, Basley, and Brogdon. Those guys are guys we like a good bit. We have Clarkson at 88% exposure in the guard position, Basley at 68 out of 100 of our top optimals, and Brogdon at 59 out of 100 of our top optimals. So who do you think in that grouping is sensitive to news and who is less sensitive to news?
Yeah, so Brogdon, we're talking about guys who are projecting favorably as is. Brogdon is projected well under the assumption that Sabonis and Turner play. I would say he is sensitive to news in the upward direction. I don't think there's any news that's going to come out that will suppress our projection for him. I think Brogdon can only go up. If Sabonis in particular is ruled out, we will see, Sabonis is just like a high usage player as part of that Indiana offense. If he gets ruled out, expect Karis LeVert and Brogdon to shoulder the load. And it's a good matchup. They're going up against San Antonio, who plays kind of average to up tempo. Indiana plays quite fast, but San Antonio just has a pretty ineffective defense. They're allowing the third highest opponent offensive rating over the last 30 days on the slate. So I think a good matchup spot for Brogdon. And then Lamb is also questionable. McDermott's questionable. There's really four Qs on Indiana: Lamb, McDermott, Sabonis, and Turner. I don't really see Turner being in or out having a big impact on Brogdon, but guys like Sabonis or Lamb being ruled out, I think could actually Lamb being out might increase Brogdon's minutes up a touch. Sabonis being out, I don't really see affecting Brogdon's minutes, more just his usage when on the floor. I don't really see Clarkson as being super sensitive to news. We kind of have the news already that activates Clarkson, that Donovan Mitchell will be out. So that's kind of the support of his projection there. In games so far this year that Mitchell has not played, there's been 4 of them, and Clarkson's minutes have been up 9, or by 8.8 minutes per game. His usage rate has been up 3%, and he scored over 10 fantasy points, 10 SuperDraft points more in these games that Mitchell doesn't play. So he and Conley are kind of direct beneficiaries from Mitchell's absence. So we got the news. I don't see Clarkson really being sensitive in any way. We do have Favors as questionable. I just don't really see that affecting Clarkson. Conley, I assume, is probable. I mean, if Conley gets ruled out, that's obviously huge for Clarkson. I'm just kind of trusting the Utah injury reporting that Conley is probable and will play. So I think Clarkson's pretty stable. And Baisley and OKC, we kind of got the news that was key there. Dort will be out, so Dort and Roby, I think, were kind of questionable coming into the night, and they have both been ruled out. So I think that kind of activates Baisley at this kind of small forward, power forward hybrid position that he kind of plays. So I don't really see Baisley as being sensitive at this point either. OKC is just thin across the board. As I'm seeing it now, they don't have any guys that are questionable. They have already listed their guys that are going to be inactive. SGA, as has been the case for a while. Dort and Roby were kind of those cues that we got the news on. So, I think there's actually pretty good stability at guard. I just could see these guys getting bumped by, a certain break with Philadelphia where, Simmons, Curry, and Harris are out, and someone like, Shake Milton or Korkmaz, or there being kind of a Philly injury shakeup that activates or really boosts the projection for some of these secondary Philly players. Curry being ruled out or Oubre being ruled out, I don't really see that putting Wiggins into cash play, but I definitely think if Curry is ruled out, we have to think pretty seriously about Wiggins for tournaments. Boston, both Walker and Smart are questionable. So I could see both of those guys maybe being ruled out, like boost a guy like Jaylen Brown, who could kind of come into play more for the guard position. So I don't think any of these 3 guys you mentioned are sensitive in their own projection, but they could, everyone on this slate could get leapfrogged by some player that isn't in consideration if injury news breaks, particularly in these early games. The Chicago-Boston game, particularly Boston, and then Golden State-Philly, both sides have significant kind of cues in their lineup.
So in summary, we have some strong plays at guard at high multiples: 1.4 for Brogdon, 1.7 for Clarkson, 1.6 for Basley. And we think even better value might come up, but those guys have a lot of strength in their projections. So it seems like the first thing one might do is, given the extreme value that's been created by news, we can kind of cross out the guys that aren't likely to get 60 adjusted, because it's fair to say that it's going to take at least 60 to get in the top 3 guard spots on the night. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Like minimum 60. Like you could even probably cross off guys that aren't going to get 65 tonight.
Yeah, I think that seems reasonable.
So Westbrook, you can basically cross out Westbrook, especially since you have threat of non-competitive game. Of course, he can get raw points above 65, but it's a big statistical dog, single-digit probability probably in this matchup. So you cross off Westbrook, you cross off Curry if he goes. basically then you start getting you're starting to cross off guys that are low teens to get there, but that's still okay, right? So you cross off Beal, you cross off Tatum, you cross off Holiday, you cross off Wall against Miami. So there are mistakes that people are going to make that we can avoid just by like crossing off the guys that can't get there tonight based on the big value that is there. Who's the first guy that can get there? I guess Booker can get there. Simmons, if the injuries broke just perfectly for him, he could get there. And then that's about the range where we're getting started, right?
Yeah. And, with a guy like Tatum, especially, like I could see, the injury news breaking in a way that really benefits him. Like if Kemba and Smart get ruled out, I do think, the Tatums, the, Jaylen Browns of the world, all of a sudden, have this really great potential to be in that, top tier of guards. Booker, you touched on, and we kind of perennially project high. He can be volatile. I think it's a great spot for him going up against Milwaukee, who plays super quick. So I think it's a strong spot for Booker. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it begins. I mean, I will say, in defense of some of these low guys like Westbrook or Curry, there are paths to them being in maybe not so much cash consideration, but tournament consideration. It's just, everyone's healthy, right? Like if Harris and Simmons and Kemba and Jimmy Butler play, and it's kind of a more healthy slate than we're anticipating, then all of a sudden that will kind of keep value down for some of these higher multiplier plays, such that I do think a guy like Westbrook could be in play. But if we, like I said, there's like a half dozen or so kind of marquee players that are questionable. If 2 or 3 of those guys get ruled out, I think it's just going to open up a ton of value for some of the secondary players on their team, such that it will be tough to, for a guy like Westbrook to be in the top 3 or so of the guard position. But if like all this stuff is just kind of smokescreen, and all these guys, Curry plays, Oubre plays, Kemba plays, Harrison, Simmons, Butler, Sabonis, then I do think there kind of becomes an increasing case for some of these low multiplier guys. But I'm not sure that it will play out that way, just given how teams have kind of been erratically handling the health, monitoring kind of the health and rest of some of these star players down the stretch.
So let's skip over to forward and center, because I do think we have a pretty good handle on guard. We think we have very high value on Brogdon, Clarkson, and Basley. We think some value could open up that jumps those guys. We think that the low multiplier guys are possible plays, but probably not going to get there for tournaments. Sprinkles, basically, for the low multiplier guys. Although Tatum, we think, could be a smash if injuries break his way. Let's go to center and then come back to forward, because center we have an interesting spot where Dwayne Dedmon is 1.85 multiplier, and our optimizer has him in 98% of optimals at the moment. Or I'm sorry, 100% of optimals at this moment. Okay, Dedmon in the past has not been on the Heat, but he has been a volatile guy, the not lock button kind of guy. How do you see this situation playing out in Miami against Houston? I should be the one speaking to this.
Yeah, I was gonna say we might have to defer to you. I can give kind of my 2 cents and kind of just overview on the projection. It is a difficult spot to project because Dedmon just joined the Heat and has been playing this backup center role. I do know in the past when Bam has been out, like the Heat would run Kelly O, they would run Myers Leonard for like a lot. I mean, when Bam is out, they would play Olynyk like in the low 30s. They don't seem to have any concerns about running their backup center kind of the full game. The question is, do they have the same kind of trust in Dedmon? It's hard to tell because Dedmon just joined the team. I will say in his days on the Hawks, I mean, he can be a very high efficiency player. He gets a ton of rebounds. Like I could see him in if he gets 30 minutes of run, like I do think he has potential for like a 20 rebound type game. He can block a lot of shots. He's not like a total zero as kind of an offensive scorer. He's just really getting like alley-oops and dunks, but there is a place for that in fantasy. I think the question, the hard thing the thing that's difficult to project is like how many minutes is he going to play? Is he going to be, one of these backup centers who is a starter in name only and plays like 20 minutes, but just is there for the tip off in the beginning of the second half and that's it? Or will he be a guy that, they give the Kelly O treatment and just run him, as if he's Bam? Do you have a sense of how they will handle this? It's a tough spot because Dedmon just joined the team, but
yeah, I would say the lock button is very dangerous, and I haven't looked at our projection. I haven't looked to see who we have close to Dedmon. So if you were like in cash and wanted to fade him, I think it's a high volatility situation, and I would be disinclined towards the lock button. But it could be a great spot at 1.85. As you said, he could pepper the box score, and it could be a great situation. I think it's a high volatility spot.
Yeah.
I think for the Heat, it's hard to say. I guess Butler is probably a favorite to play. I think what they would like to do is if you think about the role Myers Leonard played on the team, he was terrible for fantasy. We can say that, right? Mm-hmm. And what did he do in basketball terms? He really just took up a lot of space and played good defense. It's basically all he did. He had no offensive role. He played about 12 to 18 minutes, and he took up a lot of space. And what they would like to do is basically have Nunn, Robinson, and Hero shoot threes, make a bunch of threes. That's how they would like to play. And then they've got their guys taking up space, playing good D. And I think obviously Ariza was the first guy to come in once they got rid of Myers Leonard. And Ariza, he's 6'8". He's played that kind of role, the kind of Myers Leonard plus role before in Portland and elsewhere. And with Dedmon, as you said, he's a backup center. But what do they do with two? It's an unusual lineup for the Heat. It's not really how they want to play. They love playing with, say, Bam, Nunn, Robinson, Butler, because then they have a modern center who can shoot and do everything. And then they have like pinpoint 3-point guys. So basically scoring is a redundant skill set, and they can have a guy like Ariza or in the past Myers Leonard just play good defense, create opportunities, take up a lot of space. When they have Dedmon and Ariza in there, it's hard to say how that will look. I could see spots where he doesn't get a ton of opportunity. But then again, he's a guy who like profiles a decent bit like Whiteside, who only was productive in Miami. And like the team has changed a good bit, but it's kind of runs in roughly similar fashion. So couldn't he just be like Whiteside for 25 minutes? And like if he is, that's a great spot tonight. So I see it as a high value spot, but not a lock and load because of the volatility.
Yeah. I mean, the question I think we're asking ourselves and kind of the projection for Dedmon is, okay, you do have to match up against true bigs in Houston, Christian Wood and Kelly Olynyk, both the starting, center and power forward for Houston. You can't, I don't think they're going to be able to put Ariza on Christian Wood or Ariza on Kelly, maybe Ariza on Kelly Olynyk, but definitely they're going to need a true center in there to guard the combo of Wood and Olynyk. And with no Bam, they have Precious Achiuwa, who's kind of a flex big, plays power forward center minutes. And then they have, Bielitsa, who they haven't shown really any willingness to play in a significant role. And they haven't really showed Spoelstra hasn't shown a willingness to play Achiuwa in a big role either. I think the strong projection for Dedmon is just that there's not a whole lot of center depth that would challenge him for minutes. Unless I guess they just ran Achiuwa and just gave Achiuwa a ton of run. Do you see that as being likely, or is it one of these games where they're just going to surprise everyone and play Bielitsa a lot? They're kind of thin at center now that they got rid of Olynyk and Leonard.
Look, Achiuwa has profiled reasonably well on different nights, and I'm not sure he's gotten there a single time. I would recommend a decent Twitter follow is Ira Winderman, the beat reporter for the Heat. He's good at Ira Heat Beat, and he usually has a pretty good read on lineup decisions. He's always been pro Achiuwa, and it's just never happened. I would pay attention to what he has to say close to lock, but it's a high volatility situation in general. Spoelstra is not fantasy friendly in the sense of doing exactly what we expect. So I would just play it as a high value, good situation, but not as a lock and load. I would leave it at that. And I think that it is a situation where there are other guys in the running at center tonight. And unlike guard, this is a spot where the low multiplier guys could get there, right?
So who are some of those centers that you like?
Well, Jokic, they give us some 0.5 juice, 0.05 juice tonight. Usually it's he's sitting there at the 1 multiplier, so you never know. That extra 3 fantasy points could come in handy. So he's in play. And Embiid should be in play at 1.3.
How do you consider his project? Right now, the assumption is that all of the questionables in Philly play. Does particularly Simmons and Harris, would you rather see those guys in or out? If those guys are out, how does that? Does it have an even bigger boost for Embiid, or kind of a non-factor in your mind? How are you thinking about those two questionable players? relative
Yeah,
to.
it should be Harris out as the biggest boost, and then the other guys will also be a boost.
Yeah.
If they're out. If Harris is out, it should be a somewhat smash spot, and I think any of the guys, basically all of the guys, will be a plus to Embiid because they have like reasonable ball handling guard replacements, and yeah, it'll be still a closely contested game. I think he's a reasonable tournament play for sure.
Yeah, I think now that I look at it, actually, maybe the biggest or one of the big, I think, injury considerations for Philadelphia is Dwight Howard. Howard hasn't played the last 2 games, and Embiid has gone for 33 and a half and 35 and a half minutes, which, you know, in this return, like, he hasn't been a lock for 30 plus minutes. But if Howard's out, it feels like he would be a lock for kind of mid 30s minutes, which would be huge because, you know, he's such a good per minute guy.
And then elsewhere at center, if you did get Turner but no Sabonis, that would be a good play at 1.5. And then you have a lot of bad plays at 1.5 and above, other than yeah. So I think the contest is basically between your low multiplier guys, Dedmon and Turner if it falls just right. So Jokic, Embiid, Ayton, I wouldn't even really put so much in the conversation at 1.35. I think he's always sprinkle worthy, but certainly not in the cash game consideration. And then Dedmon at 1.8, and this position is somewhat less news sensitive than our other positions. And forward, okay, so forward should have a good bit of volatility. Our projections have it at the moment. Michael Porter 93%. We have Bojan 45% of optimals. We have Sabonis 19% of optimals, assuming Turner's in. And then, as you said, Tatum will be a smash if Jalen is out.
I think Jalen has been ruled in. The questionables are Kemba and Smart, but yeah, totally agree that both those Boston guys, if you know the questionables are both held out, and Fournier is already out, like, great spot for those Boston guys going up against Chicago.
And Bojan will probably be somewhat sensitive in terms of falling out with any news development rate. Oh no, he's 1.75, so he's probably pretty stable. I see Bijalisa is 1.9, so he's a good flyer. Would you say Bojan is unlikely to fall out with news flow at 1.75?
I think he's like, our projections would suggest more likely to fall out than like Baisley or MPJ or Embiid. I think he's somewhat, he could fall out. Like if Sabonis plays, but say Turner, pretty much like if Sabonis is the questionable Indiana player that plays and the other 3 guys, or specifically McDermott and Turner, are both ruled out, I could see that being, you know, a good spot to kind of bump up Sabonis in contention with Bojan. The Boston thing we touched on. I don't know. I could see if like everyone in Philly gets ruled out, I could see that maybe opening up some value for some forwards in Philly, like, you know, maybe Korkmaz or Mike Scott. or like Shake Milton has forward eligibility. I could see Shake getting a boost if there's a lot of injury shakeup and he, gets announced as like the starting shooting guard for Philadelphia. So yeah, I think Bojan's somewhat sensitive, not in his own projection, but again, in injury news breaking such that there are guys that catch him from a projection standpoint.
And Michael Porter, 1.4, high volatility guy. He's a little shaky, right? Like just by the nature of his variance.
Yeah. I think the thinking is that with Murray out, he kind of assumed the, Robin role to Jokic. And, I think is a skilled player, but is a bit dependent on scoring. So, if that's not working for him, could see. And to be honest, like I'm a little surprised that his usage rates haven't been higher in the 2 games that Murray has since been out. He's gone 22% usage rate and 19.5%, which is I don't know. I guess I just would have expected a little higher from him. But I don't know. The system seems to like him. I do think 1.4 is a fairly generous multiplier for him. But yeah, given his dependence on scoring, could see him being a bit volatile.
So, given our time constraint today, I think we should move on to MLB. I would suggest that forward is a somewhat difficult conversation until we get news flow going. We think there's a reasonable chance that the guys we currently like, Porter, Bojan, Sabonis, Tatum, Basley, there's a good chance that those guys hold, but it's extremely news flow dependent. So moving on to baseball tonight, we've got a 6-gamer. No, I'm sorry, we have a 5-gamer. 5-gamer. And we have Minnesota at Oakland canceled. So big picture, how has MLB been treating you at SuperDraft?
Yeah, so I got going quite slowly and have since made an adjustment that has been profitable, performed well for tournament purposes. I think actually Thursday and Friday last week took down the 2 low stakes MLB contests on back-to-back days. And that shift has been depending a little less on large stacking than I had early in the season. And I've kind of been trying to think about why. Well, first of all, trying to come up with kind of some reasoning as to why I've been doing that, aside from just observing that some of the winning lineups haven't been as heavy, haven't been as stack oriented as I kind of thought they would have to be. And then I'm also trying to kind of back, seeing that it's working, but beyond just saying like, hey, it's working, that's the right thing to do. But really try to think about why. And here's kind of my hypothesis. It stems from the lack of positional requirements on SuperDraft in a salaried format where you can't roster hitters, you have to roster players at each position. On a given slate, and particularly a small slate, like there's no guarantee that there will be a second baseman that hits a home run, right? There's no guarantee that there will be a catcher that hits a home run. Some of these positions could put up relative duds, but you have to roster players at these positions such that, you are okay with kind of taking players as part of a stacks and just kind of hope they are, a ship that is lifted by the tide of their overall offense. However, on SuperDraft, where the hitter, roster size or like roster slots are constrained, there's only 6 hitters as opposed to 8 hitters on the other formats. And the fact that there's no position eligibility, like I feel pretty confident that there will be, more than 6 hitters that will hit a home run, even in tonight's 5-game slate. As we're, like I said, I'm not totally confident in a 5-game slate. There will be a shortstop or second baseman or catcher that it's a home run, such that, there is kind of more, like I think in all formats, trying to get the most amount of home runs out of your lineup is desirable. But there are instances where there's just no possible home run to get from certain positions. I don't really think that that's the case in SuperDraft. Like you have a pretty good chance at getting a home run from every slot within your lineup. But that being said, I do still believe in the concept of stacking, and that, I don't want to try to just pick 6 players that hit home runs, but I am kind of trying to, link my parlays together in some way. So I have been switching from relying on 6-player constructions that are like 4-2 stack or 3-2 stack or 2-2 stack to going with just a single 3-player or 3+ player stack, and then allowing for 2 to 3 one-off plays that are filling in due to good value, and that has been effective. We'll see kind of over a larger sample if that continues to be a viable strategy. But I don't know, curious to kind of hear your thoughts on does that make sense as kind of my thinking about, stat consideration for this format and how that maybe differs? Because I do think we want to be more stack dependent in some of the more salaried formats, be more stack dependent than just like a 3-player stack and then a bunch of one-offs. Does that make sense? I don't know. And if not, maybe what kind of additions you might add to that thought process.
My instinct is that the fact that the lesser stacks or the smaller stacks might be working systematically on SuperDraft. I mean, obviously it's all early, so we're speculating on everything now, but it could have more to do with simply the smaller contest sizes. Just the fact that a lot of the contests we're interested in are 300, 400 people. And I think there's a big change that happens when you go from 300 people on a medium-sized slate to, say, 1,000 people. Just because if you have a less than complete stack, the issue that you run into when you're up against a large number of competitors is that you're up against every variant of that stack. And so you're making almost an impossibly strong statement when you're taking just the incomplete version of the full stack and you're up against every possible full stack. It just rarely comes that you hit those perfect 3 and no more, even though your team happens to score all the runs that night. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas when you're up against 300 people, now you land on a good stack. Let's just say it's Philly tonight, right? You land on a good stack, and some people are just using optimizers. They're not stacking, whatever. Realistically, you're up against only a small number of other Philly stacks, like 10 Philly stacks, 15 Philly stacks. And now it's possible to win with a stack of 3 versus a complete stack, because there's other things you have to get right. You have to get right pitcher. You have to get right the hitters that aren't in your stack, and so on. And so it's possible to win with just 3. Whereas if you were up against 15, if you were trying to win a 1,500 person tournament, it becomes less likely that 3 wins, because now instead of beating 15 Philly teams, you have to beat 50 Philly teams, and you're up against every possible full stack version. And you're just a subset of 3 versus every possible subset of 4. And of course, if you need to hit on certain pitchers, one of those teams gets the stack right and hits the pitcher too, and it gets much harder. So it could be a contest sizing thing. Personally, I've seen the home runs be less important on SuperDraft. I don't know what you think about this, but I think the multiplier, it makes it really less important that you hit home runs. Because if we just run through the SuperDraft scoring, we have 2 points for a single, 4 points for a double, 8 points for a homer, 3 points for an RBI. So automatically RBIs are like super important, right? 4 points for a stolen base. But if you think about just say a 2 RBI double, and the guy is like a 1.5 multiplier, he's getting 15 points for that at bat. Like that's a pretty strong showing. So you have guys hitting a night where they have a single, a double, and 2 RBIs, 1 run scored at 1.5 multiplier. That's a very strong showing and can compete against a home run at bat. And just given that the stats for home runs, a lot of them come from the guys that we expect to hit home runs. Like a lot of home runs come from the Acunas of the world. They disproportionately come from the low multiplier guys. So I think on a typical night, you have the guys who we expect to hit home runs hitting some home runs, and then the multiplier boosting the guys that just have an above average night. And so I've found the home runs to be slightly less important, but I haven't examined it in great detail.
Yeah, no, I think, I guess I have noticed that as well. I mean, you see, there have been nights where like guys like Cedric Mullins, have gone off without a home run, but have gotten, 3+ hits, runs scored, stolen bases. I think Jackie Bradley was like a very tournament viable candidate in, I think it was Friday maybe or Saturday, where he, had like a stolen base or two, and just kind of at a high multiplier. So I do tend to agree with you. And, maybe one, way of thinking about that is also like on other formats where you feel like your one-offs have to exclusively be players that can hit home runs. There's some value to playing some one-offs in SuperDraft who can get there via stolen base coupled with a high multiplier, something like that. So, yeah.
On say DraftKings, if your guy hits a solo homer and he gets 14 points, you're satisfied at that position and it's like all upside and you're never going to be disappointed. Whereas on SuperDraft, if you have your low multiplier guy, let's just say a 1 multiplier, he hits a solo home run, that's 10.5 points. You're still like not in the conversation yet. It's and that can be matched in a moment by just like a good base hit from a high multiplier guy. That's the sense in which I find the home runs less important.
Got it. All right. Well, do you want to jump in and maybe talk through some plays at both the batter and hitter position on SuperDraft?
Yeah. So on the pitching side, I think the multipliers suggest that you should just play like the best raw guys. So I think Woodruff is a strong play at 1.6. And I think it's going to be somewhat hard to compete with Woodruff. And then I think you kind of lock in Woodruff and then have a bit of a scattered approach for your second SP. How do you see it?
For me, Dustin May would be the guy I'd want to lock in. I mean, I feel like they kind of gave us a free square by giving him at 2x, the max multiplier, and he looked very sharp in his first start. Racks up a ton of strikeouts. Things can go sideways for him pretty quickly, but in my mind, he's got some of the best strikeout stuff on the slate. That to me would be the direction. I would probably start.
And our optimizer is liking Bundy quite a lot, which is interesting because he's 1.65 versus 1.6 for Woodruff. I've noticed just anecdotally at the start of the season, San Diego has had some high scoring. They've had some high scoring nights in a way where just historically San Diego is one of the toughest ballparks for fantasy. And it's hard to imagine that changing. But it's been a relatively fantasy friendly environment. Even for opposing teams this year, it's been interesting. We're still trying to feel out what the equipment changes have meant for fantasy this year.
Yeah.
So we think the conversation is May as our favorite, Bundy and Woodruff, and then we have our optimizer has a scattering of Duffy as well, who's more your tournament guy.
Yeah, I think Duffy can get lit up pretty quickly, but he does, have decent swing and miss stuff. A 22.5% whiff rate, which is actually a better whiff rate than May. But Duffy can seed hard contact, so you're kind of just hoping he finds a way to miss bats. Tampa Bay.
The weather is thought to be pitcher friendly.
What's that?
The weather is thought to be pitcher friendly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm seeing 14 miles per hour in a game total of 7.5, which is the second lowest total on the slate behind that San Diego game. So, I mean that some of those underlying things, kind of independent of Duffy himself, are tipping favorably. He has pitched well to start this year, so I think he's a very viable tournament option.
So at the hitter position, the optimizer likes some of the best hitters in baseball at the low multipliers. We like Trout and Betts quite a lot. In fact, those players are locked in. Betts is in 61% of optimals. Trout is in every optimal. Ohtani is in every optimal. We have a scattering of KC guys. We might, given what we said about the weather, it might be wise to, in tournaments, consider like Xing some of these Kansas City guys. They're sort of low upside guys in general, and it's the type of team that is kind of a good stack team because they sort of all go off together helping each other or not. It's not a great one-off team historically. So I would recommend keeping some of those guys in cash, some of the ones we like Stella but for tournaments, maybe Xing the KC guys, and then take some of the plays we like a lot, say Ohtani, Trout, Upton, and look for that fourth piece in the stack. And then other pieces that we like a good bit. We like Brandon Belt batting cleanup in San Francisco. That seems like a good spot. We like Trey off his 2 home run game yesterday. we have him actually locked in at shortstop. Yeah, 100% of optimals. Trey is a great fade in that case because yesterday was sort of a picture perfect spot. Today, he's up against Flaherty. Yeah. I'm wondering when I'm pulling up SuperDraft. Okay. Yeah. Why isn't Flaherty showing up on the available pitchers list? I don't understand. Because the slate includes 7.
It's probably so. I think that you're talking about the SuperDraft lobby.
Yeah.
There is some lag with how they identify available players. You have to like. I have noticed that it's maybe there hasn't been like a confirmation that Flaherty is expected to pitch. So you have to deselect only probables. You see how there's the only probables button?
So he's 1.15. Got it.
Yeah.
So I personally would just nix Trey from my tournament pool if he's going to be at all popular. I think Flaherty is a great pitcher, and Trey is 1.25. Yeah, I would nix him from my tournament pool just on the assumption that he'll be pretty popular.
Yeah. Well,
what other stats do you like in addition to the Angels?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just want to kind of brag on the Angels for a bit. I mean, they're in a great spot. This guy, Kohei, I'm gonna butcher his last name. I think his Kohei Arihara. It appears, per some of the underlying stat metrics, has really been dodging some implosive outings. His allowed WOBA, that's estimated based on launch angle and exit velo, is 0.48, which is, massive. Like some of these, a guy like Duffy, who I think is known as a pretty, a guy who gives up pretty good contact, is down at 0.38. So like it's shocking that, this guy, Arihara's ERA isn't as high, isn't higher than it is. I think, people are going to look at the ERA numbers maybe for him and, not be as high on the LA guys as they should be, or as at least the underlying StatCast metrics, which suggest they should be. And then Texas's bullpen is also, quite bad. So I think there's some real opportunity with these LA bats. And, outside of the guys like Ohtani and Trout, Jared Walsh, we've been real high on all season. He has paid off pretty regularly. He's expected about 4th tonight. David Fletcher, 1.5x. I mean, there are some higher multiplier guys you can get around the core of like Ohtani, Trout, or even Justin Upton. Let's see other stacks that we're interested in. I could see like Seattle. We typically like some of these Seattle hitters. They've been getting pretty high multipliers on some of their top of the lineup guys, a guy like Ty France, who I believe homered last night and has been a pretty productive hitter for most of the season. He's expected to bat second and at a 1.7x multiplier. These are, guys that are going up against May, who I expect to be popular. So from a game theory standpoint, like I could see some of these Seattle bats being interesting leverage plays where in lineups where you're fading May, you either go with the Seattle stack or try to get like 1 or 2 Seattle guys. We really like Luis Torrens, who's expected to bat 5th and has the 2x max multiplier. So that might be a direction to look. Tampa Bay, we've got a reasonably high projection on, although you did mention that there is kind of some weather, just the weather isn't super conducive to scoring. We do factor that into the projections, but, there's still kind of some pessimism towards some of these Tampa Bay guys. They do have good multipliers, though. I mean, Brousseau has been productive this year, and he's at 1.85x. The leadoff guy, Diaz, 1.35x. Arozarena, who we know about at 1.3. So I'm surprised some of these guys don't have lower multipliers. And the St. Louis guys, I think our model likes a decent bit. Good matchup going up against Ross. Edman batting leadoff, 135. Pretty healthy multiplier on him. Carlson, 155. Expected to bat fifth. Yeah, I mean, these are kind of some other guys. Looks like St. Louis, we just like kind of those two guys. Some of their higher or lower multiplier guys like Goldschmidt and Nolan, like we're not super high on. So, I think maybe taking just a sprinkling of these higher multiplier guys like Edman or Carlson could be kind of the way to go for St. Louis as opposed to like a full-on stack.
So it sounds like with you super high on LA, the decision is always whether to go two guys or four guys, because so much of their production is concentrated in Ohtani and Trout. It can be tempting to just get your exposure that way. The other guys, a bit weaker, less reliable bats, and I guess your inclination would be to just take an overweight stance on the Angels in general and play a lot of four stacks there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's baseball, so good lineups, good hitters can put up a donut with relative ease. But I think I would like to take my chances on this lineup going up against a starting pitcher and bullpen that I think are just very weak in general. So yeah, and I like this guy Walsh a lot. I've been playing a decent bit of him, and he's shown up a number of nights in the past week or so. Our model seems to think that some of the underlying metrics are there for him. So yeah, and, Fletcher batting leadoff, would expect to get a lot of at bats. Has some really strong hitters hitting behind him. So if he can get on base, he's got good run equity. Yeah, I like the LA bats a good bit.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up with that. We've been going for an hour or so. I'll just end by saying that these nights where you do have the big break between the early games and the late games are perfect for tournaments. We like LA a lot, and for sure people will like Trout and Ohtani a good bit. So it's one of those perfect tournament slates where you can set your lineups and then check in around 9:15 and see how your tournament lineups are doing. And on all the best ones, you keep Trout and Ohtani in there, and on all the worst ones, you switch up Trout and Ohtani to some other late game punts, knowing that the field's going to be super heavy on Trout and Ohtani. So anyway, should be a fun tournament slate, and we will be back at it on Wednesday.